Hey guys, it's Timmy, and this is Wrestling Unlimited, as this is part 2 of our, I guess you could say, how to create graphics for WWE Elimination Chamber. In part 1, I showed you how I created my graphics for a singles match, the Women's Championship match, the Women's World Title match, and now I'm going to show you how I changed those up to fit for an Elimination Chamber match. So let's jump into After Effects. We don't need any Photoshop because if you followed part 1, most of everything is already created. We're just going to change things up again, like I said, for the Elimination Chamber. So let's jump into After Effects right now and check it out. So this is what we created in part 1. It is the Women's World Championship. It's Rhea Ripley, Nia Jax, just a singles match. But we need an Elimination Chamber match set up now with 6 wrestlers on the screen. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean up our project panel here on the left side. I'm just going to take all of these that we don't really need anymore. I'm going to throw them in my assets folder. We are then going to take this one that says Women's World Title and duplicate it with Control D. And then going to just click enter once it's selected and just type in Women's Chamber. We're then going to open up that. I can close all these other timelines now. And we're going to delete what we don't need. We don't need Women's World Championship. We do need Elimination Chamber. We're going to turn it off for now. We don't need Nia Jax here, and we don't need Rhea Ripley. The next thing we need to do is we need a placeholder for our 6 wrestlers. We need to figure out where they're going to be placed. And I already did the calculations and the math here. We are going to create a new timeline, a new composition. I'm going to keep the height the same, but I'm going to drop the width down to 255. Now with that, we're going to take our wrestlers, and we're just going to use the same wrestlers we already had. We're going to take our Rhea Ripley, and we're going to throw it down in our composition. We are going to press S on our keyboard to scale it and bring it down. This is all preference on how you want them to look, as far as like how small you want them, how large you want them, how much of their head's cut off, how much is not cut off. And then we're going to stick at about right there. We're going to go to our Woman's Chamber file or composition, and above Dust 1, but under Chamber background that has the mask on it, we're going to place our Rhea Ripley. It's named Comp 1, but we could just name it Ripley. We're going to put it right there. Boom, we've got Rhea Ripley placed in there. So now what we want to do is we want to duplicate this 5 more times. So first, actually, to make it easier, I'm going to take Ripley and I'm just going to move her to the side. Control D to duplicate and just bring it over. And I want the edges of these butted up perfectly. So we're going to do the rest of them here, and then I'll show you how to center them and even them all out. And so now what we're going to do, that we have our 6 Rhea Ripleys here, we're just going to try to line it up centered. 3 and 3, so I would put the center mark right here between the 2 Rhea Ripleys. So that should be our center mark. Now you go, well, I don't need 6 Rhea Ripleys. What now? Go back to your project panel and duplicate your Rhea Ripley pre-comp. We're going to name it Jax. Enter Jax. We're going to open that up. And we're going to replace Rhea with Nia Jax. So you can delete your Rhea Ripley, throw your Nia Jax in there, do the same thing we did to scale it. And then you're going to have to go in here. And we're going to figure out where you want Rhea Ripley placed. I want Rhea Ripley right here. So that would be this composition here. So I'm going to turn that, nope, this one. I'm going to turn that off for a second. And that means that this one I want to be Nia Jax. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace this layer, this pre-comped layer. What you need to do is down on your timeline in your composition, click the one you want to replace and make sure it's highlighted. Then select your Nia Jax in the project panel. Hold Alt, drag it down, and place it right over. Now here's the thing, and that doesn't look good, but we're going to fix it here in a second. But I need to tell you, if you don't have them both selected, and don't press Alt, because watch what happens when I want to replace it with Rhea Ripley, and it's just going to place it over. Or if it's not selected at all, it's still going to do the same thing. It's just going to place it wherever. So you need to make sure both are selected. Hold Alt, and Alt will replace. So we can turn this Rhea back on. We need to go into our Nia Jax. We need to scale her down a little bit. That's good enough for me. So now you say, still got all these Rheas. So we're going to turn off our Nia. We're going to turn off the Rhea we want to keep. We're then going to go back to either our Nia Jax or Rhea Ripley. Doesn't matter. You want to duplicate one of those, Command D again. Then we're going to name that TBD. We're going to open that up. We're going to delete our Rhea Ripley. And I have a render here of a female wrestler that I have grayed out. We're going to scale it down. And then this is all personal preference, how you want this to look. So we're going to come back into our women's chamber here. And you can select multiples. If you want to replace multiples at one time, you can select multiples in your timeline. Then select the one from your project panel you want to replace with. And just drop it on top of any of them. It's going to replace all of them. And then another thing I want to do is personal preference. I always say that because you could make this decision if you want to do it or not. I'm just going to throw a question mark on it because it just looks cool. Come back here. Cool. Turn these back on. So now with our women's wrestlers set how we want them right now, we need dividers to go between the wrestlers. And really, this is personal preference. I'm going to show you two different ways that you can do this. They're basically going to come out the same, however you want. And I'm going to teach you how to make them look like chains to match the Elimination Chamber, or if you want to go another route with a plugin that is free that I'll show you how to get. But first off, I'll show you how to do it with the chains. So you could take any just chain PNG. Take it, you place it above all of the pre-comps with the wrestlers, and then you could do one of two things here. You can either, because you see it's not big enough, so you can either just scale it up to where it is big enough, or if you say, I scaled it, but I don't like how big it looks, then we can go back to 100%, move it down, all the way down to the bottom, duplicate it, Control D, and just move it up. And we're going to just match those ends. So if you're going to do it that way, where you're matching two together, zoom back out, you're going to need to pre-comp those together. Select them both. Right click, pre-compose, name it chain. And now we need to animate it. As I stated previously, I like to animate starting on frame 10. It's just how I do it because of how I use transitions. And so then we go 10 over. So we open our position with P, add a keyframe, go to the front of it, and just bring it down or up, depending on which way you want it to come from. Then you can check your animation there. We're going to click F9 to ease those keyframes. We are then going to grab our 2 points here with our graph editor. And if you don't know how to use the graph editor properly, I do show that in part 1 of this video that was posted on Thursday. So then we can check that render out, and then we can check it here. Boom. Also make sure to turn motion blur on. You're going to need to go into the pre-comp, turn motion blur on for both of those. Now we can go back here to Women's Chamber. Not bad. Don't hate it. So then all you need to do now is come here, duplicate it, go to, and there may be an easier way to do this, but this is how I do it. Go to the last keyframe and make sure you're on the last keyframe with your playhead and just go over to where you want your chain to be. And we're going to duplicate that for all of them. So now, if you see here, you have your animation line showing you where your animation is starting from and where it's going to, and it's at an angle. Because if we just play our animations here, they're all going to come in wonky. So what we now need to do is go to the front of all those layers, and we literally just need to move it over so your animation line is now straight. We're going to do that for all of them. Now that we have all of our animations lined up, we can check them. Those render for a second. Start it over. Boom. There we go. That's one way you could do this if you want to use chains or any other like PNG images. Now, what I am actually going to do is I'm going to use a program called Saber to make lines that will, in the end, look like this. And let me go to where they're fully rendered in. Let me delete the chains since we are not using those anymore. So these little like electric looking lines. So to get Saber, you're going to need to go to a website called Video Copilot. I will link it in the description below. And we're going to go to the search bar here and just type in Saber, S-A-B-E-R. We're going to search that. It's going to be right here, Saber plugin. We're then going to go down to tutorial notes and click download Saber for Windows. You're going to download it. You're going to make sure that your After Effects is closed when you install it. And then once you reopen your After Effects, it will be installed into your version of After Effects. So let's jump back into After Effects. I'll show you how to use Saber. Let's delete these lines that I have here. And what you want to do is you want to create a new black solid layer. So you can just go layer, new, solid. And really it can be any color, but I just make it black. You're going to bring it. It actually doesn't matter where you put it now, but we're just going to put it where it needs to be. I'm also going to turn off, for now, this layer. Actually, it would be easier if you build this out here on the top, so nothing's above it impeding and distracting. So with the black solid selected, we're now going to go up to Effects, Video Copilot, Saber, and it's going to bring in this line. Kind of looks like a neon light, maybe a lightsaber. And when we go in here, we can click Presets, and they have all these different cool presets to look like all these different things. And they're super customizable. But the one we want is hardcore. So now the next thing we need to do here is we need to adjust our core, our glow, and all of that. Because it's too thick and a little more intense than I want. So we're just going to play around with our settings. I already have the settings that I want. I'm going to change the glow intensity because I don't want it to glow too much over the wrestlers. And then I'm also going to bring the core size down because I think it's too thick. I'm going to bring it down to like 1.7. That's exactly what I want. So now the next thing you need to do before we animate it is you need to come down here to render settings and open that up. And as you see here, composition settings are set to black. So you see the black background. We don't want that. You want to drop down that menu and click transparent. Now, transparent layer. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to zoom out. We're then going to take our bottom anchor point and stick it down all the way at the bottom. Try to keep it as straight as you can. Then we're going to take our top anchor point and also bring that all the way down so you can't see it. So what we are going to do is we're going to put a keyframe and make sure your playhead's at the beginning, a keyframe for core end. Move forward 10 frames or however many frames you want. And we're just going to drag our core end, the top anchor point, all the way up to the desired position you want. Make sure your motion blur is turned on. You can click U on your keyboard just to make sure your keyframes are there. We're going to select the keyframes, easy ease. Select both keyframes in our graph editor. Slide those over. And let's check our animation. We can also go back to 100% here. Let's go to the front. And let's check our animation. So it's going to render in slowly. And I will say, using Saber is going to add to your render time. Saber is a very GPU intensive plugin. So now let's see how it looks. That's exactly how I want. But now what we need to do is we're going to move this down to exactly where we want it, above our wrestlers. And we're going to duplicate it in the positions where we need it. All right, so with all my Saber layers where I want them, I'm going to go to frame 10. Remember, I want all my animations starting on frame 10. So I'm going to select all of those, put my left bracket. It's going to move them over. So then when we go, we're there. Now, here is something that I highly, highly recommend you do. With all of your Saber layers selected, right click, pre-compose, just name it Saber. It is now going to be in its own pre-comp. So double click that. And I would recommend rendering this out separately, because if, say, we're creating a video every time somebody qualifies for the Elimination Chamber, you're going to essentially be creating 3, 4, 5 videos. And Saber is, like I said, going to add a lot to your render times. So if you pre-render it out now and then bring it back in as a video file, a transparent video file, it's not going to really hurt your render time. So all you need to do with your Saber composition selected, click Control M. You will then send it to your render menu, your render queue. And then you can either render it as a QuickTime file or an AVI file. I recommend a QuickTime file because it's going to be a smaller file. AVI files are large. So we're going to go here, make sure your format is at QuickTime. You're then going to go to your format options. Now, this is important to make sure you have a transparent background and an alpha channel. Click format options, go to video codec, and we're going to go Apple 4444. Click OK. Then the next thing you need to do, under video output, channels, you're going to need to click RGB plus alpha. If you only click RGB, you're going to get your Saber layers, but on a black background. If you select alpha, you're just going to get basically an empty background. And then if you select RGB and alpha, it will look just as it looks there. Also, before you render it out, make sure that your work area here is the exact length you want it to be before you render it. And really, you only need 30 seconds of this, even if you're going to use it in like a 4 or 5 minute clip. Because of the way Saber works, it's very easy just to keep it looping. But with that rendered out, we're going to go back to our woman's chamber. And we also now need to animate our, well, women renders coming on. We're going to go here. We're going to select all 6 of our women. We're going to hit our left bracket to bring them over to the 10 spot. We're then going to shift page down to move 10 frames forward. We're going to bring up P for position, create an keyframe, go back to the beginning, and we're just going to move them all down selected. We're going to move them all the way down. We want them all to come on at the same time. We want them all to do everything the same. We're then going to select all of our keyframes, of course, F9 to easy ease, go to our graph editor, move them all in, move it in, and then we can check our animation. And there we go. Now, my preference here is I don't want the lines and the wrestlers coming up and looking just super uniform together. What I want is maybe the wrestlers to come in 2 frames after the Sabers start. So we're going to move those over 2 frames. Also remember on everything to turn on motion blur. So we're going to need to go into our Rhea Ripley, turn on motion blur, our Jax, turn on motion blur, our TBD, turn on motion blur. So now let's see how that looks. Go back to the beginning. There we go. That's exactly how I want it. So the last thing we need to do is we need to add some text. I already created the text in Photoshop, so we're going to bring that in right here. I have it in our assets folder. I want that to go under dust 1. I'm then going to move it down where I want it, about there. And remove that to frame 10. We're going to turn our Elimination Chamber logo back on. That's already animated, but because the other text was different, it's higher up, as you see. So whether you just use the same animation there and just adjust it or bring in a new one, you'll have to reanimate it. But we're not going to reanimate it. We're just literally going to make sure we're on the keyframe here and just bring it down. What we do need to do is animate our text here. So we're going to go there to Women's Chamber PNG, the text, P for position, create a keyframe, turn on motion blur, make it a 3D layer, go back to the beginning. We're going to take our Z space here and just bring it out. Bring it out, bring it out, bring it out. Select both keyframes, F9 for easy ease. Go to our graph editor, Slide those both to the left. I'm going to do one last thing. I want the logo to come in first, and I want the text to come in second. So we're going to drop that back by 2 frames. Let's check that again. And there we go. We're done. That is how I adjusted the graphics to fit for an Elimination Chamber match. With that, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on me taking the original graphics we made for just a normal one-on-one match and adjusting them for an Elimination Chamber match. Remember, if you want to get the project files that we did use or any of the assets, they are available on our Patreon, patreon.com/PWUnlimited. With that, have a great rest of your time, guys. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below.